All right, folks, we're about to begin. And calling our three wonderful, distinguished presenters up onto the bima. You can start by giving them all a round of applause. I'll introduce them individually, but let's... Okay, folks, take your seats. I think this is a good, you'll figure out how close to be. Welcome, everybody. Shana Tova, Chatima Tova. So, Yom Kippur afternoon, even though Yom Kippur has a kind of air of solemnity about it, Yom Kippur afternoon has an incredibly positive and optimistic vibe because we are slowly about to sail into the conclusion of Yom Kippur and into the promise of the new year. And I would actually say the same about this topic. On the one hand, there's something very solemn about it. We're going to be talking about anti-Semitism on college campuses and the challenges that these young people are facing, and they are considerable, and in some respects, very difficult to fend off. But the optimistic part of this whole conversation is these extraordinary people who are advocating, who are proud of who they are, who are speaking back, who are fighting back when necessary, who are finding allies that are helpful allies. And before I introduce these three individuals, I just want to say we are blessed in this community to have many highly active, highly thoughtful university students. There are many people that I could have asked. Many of you guys are here. So it was an embarrassment of riches, and I just called and reached out to three individuals, and here they are. So starting with all the way over to my right, please just give a lovely welcome to Zach Astroff, who is a student at the University of Maryland, class of 2027. And sitting to his left is Emma Sassooni, who graduated from Macaulay Honors College of the City University of New York in 2024. And right here to my right, Cornell University, class of 2025, Eli Goodwin. So, to start off our conversation, I want to ask each of them to just reflect briefly on what college life is like for Jewish students in general, or if I might say, before October 7th of 2023, what was it like to be Jewish on your campus? So, starting with Zach.
Sure. So I'm very fortunate to go to a school like the University of Maryland that has such a strong and vibrant Jewish community, such a large Jewish community of all denominations that are able to garner hundreds of kids across each services denomination for the high holidays, and makes everyone feel so welcomed.
Okay, great. Emma, say a bit about your experience generally as a Jewish student and the Jewish students at Macaulay Honors College and City University.
Yeah, so I go to Macaulay. Yes. At Macaulay Honors College, my home campus is Baruch, that has a really good and large Jewish community with a really strong Hillel. Also, Baruch is a really diverse school, so there's all different people, all different backgrounds, all different religions. So it's a great place to be.
All right. Eli.
Just like Emma and Zach, Cornell has been, there's no difference whether or not you're Jewish or not in terms of your college experience before October 7th. The school is 25% Jewish, which is a pretty large percentage. We're 2% of the population, so everything from Greek organizations to business clubs or other sort of recreational groups has always been open to everyone.
All right. So that's just sort of setting the table. So you hear from these three students who have experienced really kind of comfortable environment as Jews and felt that their Jewish peers have been comfortable as Jews as well. And now we're going to speak about post-October 7th, 2023. So I'm going to ask each of you to reflect on what's been going on your respective campuses. So have there been protests? Have the protests, in your understanding, crossed inappropriate lines? Do you believe that they've been anti-Semitic? So there are other aspects of that whole question, but let's just start right there. In terms of the protests that have been occurring on your respective campuses. So let's start with Eli.
I would say so. It's hard to gauge whether or not the protests are fully anti-Semitic or not, because it seems like it's a lot of a game of like monkey see, monkey do, right? Where if a protest or an encampment begins at Columbia, within like 3 to 5 business days, it's going to be at Cornell as well. And that's just a testament to social media and the way that these sort of movements are spreading now. When October 7th originally happened, we were off campus, we were on break for the weekend, and things were pretty tame until Israel did begin its ground operations in Gaza. That's when the protests started to pick up, both in frequency and intensity, and that sort of culminated in the encampments that happened at the end of last year. Over the summer, things were pretty quiet in terms of the Instagram pages and other social media accounts of the main sort of pro-Palestine organization on campus, which is called the Coalition for Mutual Liberation. Essentially, it's a mix of the Students for Justice in Palestine chapter, Jewish Voice for Peace, and then a bunch of student affinity groups like the Muslim Students Union, the Black Students Union, etc. And they have come back to campus with a pretty strong vengeance, I would say. There was a big disruption at the career fair a couple weeks ago because Boeing and L3 Harris were there, and as defense contractors, they were deemed enabling the alleged genocide going on. Since then, they culminated in the suspension of a PhD student who's really been leading a lot of the CML activities, and in effect, it sort of martyrized him. The university actually just changed its stance from suspending and deporting him to only suspending him from being physically on campus. It sort of has caved to a lot of student pressure on that front. But it's frustrating because it seems like the Jewish students who sort of convey their concerns with student assembly meetings and meetings with the administrators and through the proper channels are heard, but they're not always acknowledged the way the louder students who are protesting career fairs and campus life are with foghorns or other sort of loud, noisy things.
Right. So just a follow-up question, because you said that the campus leadership chose to suspend but not to deport. So does the campus have the power of deportation, or were they going to recommend that he be deported to immigration?
Yeah, so the campus was collaborating with the Department of Homeland Security because he's a Black international Muslim student, so a lot of his on-campus activities were being monitored pretty heavily, I think, even prior to the career fair, but there was a lot of faculty and student outrage at the idea that they'd be suspending him, and so they have sort of lightened the punishment.
Right, okay. Moving on, thank you, Eli. Emma, say a little bit about the protests at your college, your university, and the nature of the protests.
Yeah, so I agree with what Eli said about the change in frequency and intensity of the protests, because right after October 7th, they seemed very tame, but over time you saw a change in how many people were coming, what clubs were joining in on the protest, and what they were saying. So while in the beginning it didn't come off as anti-Semitic, by the end they were calling out Jewish student leaders on campus, by the end of last semester, I mean, and they were telling the Baruch Hillel to go to hell, sorry. But they were just saying really awful things about students and Jewish organizations on campus that weren't on its own just pro-Israel. They were just Jewish organizations, and that's a clear line of the clear sign
Crossing
of
of the line.
anti-Semitism.
Right, right. No, absolutely. I mean, Emma's saying that these protests included statements about Hillel in general, about Jewish students in general, not even connected in those statements to Israel, which would be a clear indication that it's not just a critique of Israel, but that it is crossing the line into anti-Semitism. Zach, say a little bit about University of Maryland in this regard.
Sure. So right from the get-go, post-October 7th, these protests that were happening on my campus were certainly anti-Semitic, and from the get-go, they were as intense as they would get. We would see chants for the elimination of the state of Israel, the common phrases, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, which is a genocidal chant that the pro-Palestinian movement has attempted to cover up as an acceptable social movement, but instead calls for the elimination of the Jewish people from our indigenous homeland in Israel. And beyond that, just a bunch of isolated incidents that have kind of just gone unchecked. There has been chalking on the main parts in campus where they've written things like Holocaust 2024, Holocaust 2.0, and you'll have Jewish students who are outwardly Jewish, wearing their Magen David, wearing a kippah, who have to walk past these protests to get to class because they're in the center of campus, and they'll be jeered at, they'll be spat at, and these are things that just have gone on and really don't go addressed. A very close friend of mine who helped to co-found a pro-Israel organization on campus that I run, that I'll get more into later. Yeah. He's an architecture major, and in his architecture classes, there are multiple students that have written anti-Semitic defacements on his desk, have drawn pictures of Palestinian flags, and have personally said things to him during class that are blatantly anti-Semitic, and the administration has failed to act on these things. And I think what's more important to acknowledge than the state of the protests is the culture that's being created on college campuses across America. I'm very fortunate that at Maryland I can say that it's much more tame than many other places across the country, at schools like Michigan, at schools like Columbia, at schools like Harvard. But that being said, we are so grateful that at a school like Maryland, that our situation isn't worse, that there is this culture that is being created, this culture of complacency with microaggressions, which is something that Jewish students across the country need to start standing up to. Because while I am very thankful that Maryland is much more tame than some of these campuses, we cannot accept these microaggressions. I'm in a class, which is ironically a class on misinformation and disinformation in media, where my professor has a Free Gaza sticker on her laptop, overtly displaying her political views and making me feel as though this class is not a place where I can share what I feel, openly share what I feel without my grade being penalized. These are the types of things that Jewish students across college campuses need to feel emboldened enough to speak up about, because the longer that we say, well, at least it's not as bad as getting physically assaulted at a place like Columbia, the larger and larger this problem will grow and will fester.
Yeah, well, thank you. That is a very, very important point that you made, Zach. And I wanted to come back to Eli, because you have sort of, the notoriety, I guess, of having been in the class with the professor who made, I'm going to paraphrase it, but you may know more precisely. After the attacks of October 7th, this professor said that he found Hamas's attacks invigorating, or exhilarating, I think was the word. And just following up on what Zach said, what's it like to be in class as a student where the power dynamic is such that the professor is in the position of authority and the professor is saying something like this? So could you reflect a little bit on that, and also on what's happened subsequently with this professor at Cornell?
Yeah, so I was in Intro to Black History last fall, and a couple days after October 7th, the Professor Russell Rickford, spoke at an off-campus rally where he described the attacks as exhilarating and exciting. He was placed on leave, but essentially the administration's hands were tied because he's a tenured professor and the comments were not made in the classroom. So while he left for the rest of the semester and I never had to deal with him in the academic setting, what was sort of upsetting about the situation was the way that many of the students in the class did rally around him. We had another professor come in for the remainder of the semester who did finish teaching the course, but both the professor and the students sort of made these comments that suggested that they were not happy with Rickford leaving, that suggested that the administration was essentially censoring or silencing Rickford, and that he had these rights to speak about the things he said the way he did. Since the end of this past semester, what's the most unfortunate, though, is that Rickford has sort of been martyrized. You know, he came back with a total vengeance. When the encampments went up in late April last semester, he was filmed always inside the encampments. He was in the sort of human body chains they were making up so that the Cornell Police Department couldn't break through and get inside. And this semester, you know, he was at the career fair. I got sent a video yesterday in a Jewish students WhatsApp group that was new footage from the Cornell Police Department about the career fair. They were pressing charges on some of the students that assaulted the police officers, and you can see in the video Russell Rickford holding the phone and getting in the police officers' faces as they try to barge inside. So it's not that the administration necessarily even handled him improperly, it's that he has, as a result, put himself sort of as the linchpin of the movement on campus, and the student body that supports it has really rallied around him and made him the figurehead.
Right. So, I mean, very disturbing, you know, obviously, raises questions of the limits of free speech. Somebody is advocating for a professor to be able to express opinions, but this is an expression that is hateful, that is damaging. I'm not a free speech expert, but somebody who is calling murder and maiming and butchering and raping exhilarating should not have, I would argue, that freedom to be able to express that, certainly around university students over which this person has the power of authority. And what I want for us to now turn our attention to, and Eli, you referred to it a little bit, is what have been the reactions of the leadership of the university, the leadership of the respective Hillels on your campus, the leadership of Chabad. In other words, where you as young adults would turn to older adults who are supposed to be the adults on the campus and expect to have some regulation of the inappropriate, to say the least, behavior that's going on. What have you discovered and what has been your impression? And you can talk about the university leadership, you could talk about the Jewish Hillel, Chabad, or any other dimension. What has been your experience of their response post October 7th to what's been going on? So who spoke first last time? I don't remember. All right, you know what, Emma, why don't we start in the middle with you?
You said Emma?
Yeah, Emma,
Okay.
please. The leadership.
I think that the response from the Hillel, like my Hillel, was really good. In fact, I think we've gotten stronger over the past year because we garnered more support from students who are really seeking help. So on the Hillel's front, really great. From school administration, from Macaulay, it was like pulling teeth trying to get our dean to actually send a message of what had gone on post October 7th. So I was on student council at my school for all 4 years, and anytime there was like an issue, anything that happened to the Jewish students on campus, anything going on in Israel, the dean never said anything. And it came to the point where like the 2 other Jewish students on the student council with me were like, this is really like come on. So if the dean was not going to do something, the 3 of us decided to put together a petition of all the students and as many students as we could from CUNY, professors, students, alumni, anyone that we could, to sign off and have our dean actually send a message. The message itself, it was what it was. Like, it wasn't a life-changing message. It wasn't taking a strong stand for the Jewish students on our campus. But I think that many of us face that, like as college students from our administration. The president of Baruch College, he did like an okay job. He sent something more timely, as did the chancellor of CUNY. Since then, speaking to administration, I had the opportunity as an officer of the Hillel, as the treasurer, to speak to our president of Baruch personally as our e-board, and it was a productive conversation. As well with the dean of Macaulay, we ended up having a meeting with her as well as the Jewish students and in our student government.
Well, thank you. Emma, if I could just, follow up. Do you have a sense, and you may or may not, what was the resistance? What was what was holding back people either from responding as strongly as they should or from responding at all? Do you think they were afraid of something? Do you think they were balancing competing issues? What do you think was at work here?
I think that's like the golden question, because like, why can't you just like condemn, like, why can't you say like, this is a terrorist act and like, it's not okay?
Right. It seems like it's something that a university administrator should be able to do, and yet,
like they did not. So it's, yeah, it is very frustrating. I think as a Brook student, as a CUNY student, we are like, our school is representative of so many different people, and I think that like a large portion are also people who would be more pro-Palestine and like very sympathetic to what's happening, as everyone can and should be. I guess it's just hard to balance both sides, and you don't want to choose a side. You don't want to anger one person and be too sympathetic to someone else.
so this sort of balancing act that goes on, which maybe we'll get back to addressing that a little bit more deeply. Thanks, Emma. Eli, leadership of all sorts at Cornell, what has been your impression?
So the administration has been definitely a little bit tepid. I do think. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
All right. So the administration's definitely been a little bit tepid. I would say that to some extent, like Emma said, their hands are tied, where they have a large constituency that doesn't necessarily have the same beliefs that we do, and it's difficult to act in the days after October 7th. The since retired President Martha Pollock sent out 3 different iterations of post-October 7th email. The first one was sent after outrage that nothing was sent at all. The second one was sent because she said Muslims and Palestinians and Jews, but not Israelis. And I forget what the qualms were specifically about the third one, but there's definitely been a lot of back and forth that the administration's experiencing from this sort of 2 opposing camps. In terms of the Chabad and Hillel leadership, I would say that the students that are at the helm of these organizations have really been tremendous. They have been organizing people to show up to student assembly meetings when there's a BDS referendum on the table. They're the ones that have been organizing displays on the art squad that commemorate the hostages on the 1-year anniversary of October 7th. But the specific leadership has largely, I think, been a little bit riding on the coattails of the student body, which is at times frustrating. The Hillel leadership has been a little bit more supportive. I was reached out to by the rabbi in the days after Rickford made those comments last year as a student in his class. They're also, both the Chabad leadership and the Hillel rabbi are in this WhatsApp I mentioned earlier with about 450 to 500 Jewish students on campus. But in terms of changing any policy, it really does seem like the students that are on the boards of Chabad and Hillel are the ones that are really driving that change.
Okay, thank you. Maryland.
Yes. So the response by our Hillel and Chabad was incredible. They provide any type of service that you might need, just a community in totality, a community to fall back on, of people who will support you if you're having trouble through the difficult times that the events of October 7th brought up for people. It was a place where you could go and just see other people who were feeling the same way and come together in community. As for the school administration itself, it's a different case. I think a problem that is facing not just my school, but college campuses across America is the inability to separate humanitarian moments from the political nature of this conflict. Obviously, the Israel-Hamas war is a very complex geopolitical conflict, and because of that, administrations are hesitant to make decisions that cater too much to either side in the name of political neutrality. But that being said, we can recognize that a day like October 7th can be separated from this war and from the overall conflict as a moment in which we can see what happened to the Jewish people, the brutality that the Jewish people faced, and the attack on the Jewish state of Israel, and that separation has been something that's been non-existent. So the day after October 7th, on October 8th, our school administration sent out an email saying that this is a time where we need to kind of get behind our community, and then listed our Jewish students, our Muslim students, our Palestinian students, our Israeli students, and our Christian students. And sending an email of this nature delegitimizes the pain and the horrors that the Jewish students on our campuses and the Jewish people around the world face from this day. October 7th was not a moment where we can look upon all people who this conflict has affected. No, October 7th was the worst massacre of Jewish people since the Holocaust. And that is something that school administrations should be able to separate from the overall conflict and say to their Jewish students, we recognize that this is a day where we need to support you, and this is a day that has deeply affected every single one of you.
Right. Wow. So Zach, thank you for that. Well said. Zach, I also want to amplify what you said by saying that universities should be places that can make important intellectual distinctions. And so for the leadership of the university to issue, I'm going to borrow Eli's word, a tepid and ostensibly inclusive statement that doesn't address what actually happened to a specific group of people, that shows an incapacity to make important intellectual distinctions. Similarly, to be able to say, on the one hand, that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is complicated, and there certainly has been blame on Israel's side and blame on the Palestinian side, but that what happened on October 7th was a travesty for humanity. So it's not making me feel very optimistic about some of the leadership that they are failing to make those kinds of intellectual and moral distinctions. I just want to ask you, Zach, because you shared this when we were speaking among ourselves privately, and you'll get it more precise than I will, but that there was a rule that came out that nobody on campus could wear anything or put up a banner or anything that had anything to do with this conflict, including like a t-shirt that would be advocating for the hostages to be released. So can you say a little bit more about that? Because that seems to be even another iteration of what you're describing.
Sure. So directly after October 7th, across our campus as well as campuses nationwide, we had the hostage posters put up across campus as a way to advocate for the safe return of our hostages and to inform people of the situation that was happening in Israel, as directly after October 7th, not everybody, especially those not in the Jewish community, were fully aware of what was going on. In response to putting up these hostage posters, Students for Justice in Palestine at the University of Maryland counteracted this action of ours by putting up posters of their own, that the purpose was not to, commemorate the loss of life in Gaza, but to counteract what we had been doing. And were posters that were meant to, I won't say intimidate, but to get back at us for putting up our own posters that would harp on the atrocity that happened and delegitimize it in ways. Mm-hmm. And because of this, the university's response was to ban putting up any posters from both sides. And I think this is a direct parallel to the email that they sent out on October 8th, where they had an inability to distinguish between the two sides. Now, it doesn't mean that you're taking a side to recognize the humanity in making a decision. Our president at Maryland on October 7th came to the vigil that we had to scramble together to make after that terrible day. And he spoke in front of thousands of Jewish students at the University of Maryland. And I walked away that night, obviously distressed, but feeling I'm supported here at Maryland, to wake up the next day to seeing that email. And I think that is the root of the problem, that there's no distinction being made between making a decision that has humanity in it and staying politically neutral. Those are two things that can be separated. You don't have to be taking a side politically to say that it's okay to put up posters that advocate for the safe return of our hostages. It's not taking a side to send out an email that says to our Jewish students, we are with you on this, in these times of horror for you. But the administration at my school and at schools nationwide, their inability to do so has shown that this is a distinction that isn't being made but needs to be made.
Right, thank you, very important. So we've reflected on your disappointment with university leadership and your support and a little bit of disappointment with some of the official Jewish leadership. So that was a little bit kind of more mixed. But I want you now to talk about your peers who are not Jewish. And so all of you have friends who are not Jewish. Your universities are not 100% Jewish, and even if they were, you would have friends of all backgrounds, just knowing you as I know you. And so talk a little bit about what that's been like post-October 7th. Have you felt supported? Have you felt disappointed? Have you discovered sort of surprises about some people who were your friends that were disappointing in some way? So Eli, why don't you start?
Yeah, I would say, by and large, I've been really lucky to have a lot of supportive friends. I feel like the student body on campus is pretty inquisitive and sort of open to learning new things. I've been really lucky to have some friends ask me specifically, like, hey, I saw this in the news, or I saw this on CNN, like, what's going on? Can you speak on it a little bit more? And, if I'm able to, I can. But I would say, beyond looking to sort of understand the cold, hard facts, people have been very just emotionally supportive of one another. I had a lot of friends who attended both the original vigil on October 7th, or after October 7th of last year, and the one-year vigil this year on October 7th. I've had friends check up on me and other Jewish friends asking if we're okay. And I think part of that might just stem from it being a largely Jewish campus where there's this understanding of what the high holidays are, what Passover is, and there's Jewish people, or non-Jewish people rather, who come with me sometimes to Chabad on a Saturday night or for a Seder. But I know that unfortunately my experience is not necessarily the most common one, and that a lot of people have had to sort of break away friendships or distance themselves from people that they thought were really close friends of theirs after October 7th.
Right, thank you. Emma, what's it been like for you with your friends who are not Jewish, of other backgrounds, and others of other backgrounds on your campus?
Yeah, so I would agree and say that I've been really lucky that my close circle has been really wonderful and supportive. I have a mix of like non-Jewish and Jewish friends, and over the past year we've like celebrated Shabbat a lot. Like my non-Jewish friends are asking the questions, like they want to know more and they want to show their support. That being said, I think that Zach was picking up on a good point of like a change in culture like on our campuses, and I think that affected like outer groups of friends, where it became like the trendy thing to isolate from your Jewish or like pro-Israel friends. So I would say like in the early weeks after like October 7th, I was really struggling. I was trying to understand like why are some of the people who I used to say hello in the halls to, why are they like not giving off the same energy anymore? And I realized that it was, or like when I would step outside and see a protest and I see some of like my so-called friends like on the other side, I'd be like, what is going on over here? What am I missing? And like, what is that feeling? And I guess I came up with like, or I like understood it to be like a feeling of betrayal, of like seeing like people you thought were your friends like rooting for your destruction just outside at school at 2 p.m. But yeah, I think there was definitely a switch in culture that affected some of my outer friends. And it was on campus, it's on social media, it's like anywhere you go. At one point I was like living in the dorms and a bunch of like the people, even my roommate, was like not very pro-Israel. So there's just, wherever you go, there was this like second guessing of how has like your relationship changed.
Yeah, no, thanks so much. So I know when we had this conversation, so Jonathan Greenblatt and I spoke with a number of our college students who are on campuses this past spring, and one of them reported that there were things that people that he thought were his friends would post on social media. And so that's another dimension of it too, that you sort of, you say, okay, we're on the soccer team together, or we're hanging out together, and then you see what that person posts, and that at the very least gives you pause and can make you feel kind of really, really shaken up. Did you feel that you could approach these people and say to them, I'm not saying you should have, but was there a part of you that wanted to say, like, what's going on? Like, can't you just come and talk to me?
Yes, like for sure. And some I did have conversations with. They were like there was like one instance like really early on where like someone came up to me and like said something really horrible about like just really horrible about the protests and like about Israel. And I don't know, I had to take a step back and realize like maybe they were never like my best friends, and
Yeah.
maybe it just wasn't, these are like lines that I don't want to draw, like I don't want to cross. And yeah, I don't know. There were definitely conversations though, I have to say that, like outside of a protest one time, like two girls who we had like gone to parties together and like we hung out, like really randomly like came up behind me, and I was with like another student, and they're like, "We hope your family goes to hell." And I
Wow.
was like really struck because I had like been saying like we said hello in the hallways together,
Right.
like we had mutual friends, like we're nowhere near like best friends or close friends, but we have like these mutual friends. And I was caught off guard. I originally thought it was a joke, and I was like, sick joke. And then I realized that she was like, they were serious, and that like threw me. I like was so thrown off. And then to see how like that transpired over like the remaining months, it was just like blow after blow. So
Right.
like some people, yes, I had a conversation with, and like some I was just like, I'm good. Like, it's like that's
So-
not use of my energy.
So Emma, first of all, I'm so sorry. I mean, that's
That's
no, but that's awful. It's awful to be on the receiving end of that. And what's so disturbing, and we'll get to Zach for a moment, is, you know, what else could that person have said? That person could have said, "I'm really troubled by the deaths of children in Gaza. Can we talk about it?" Right? They could have said, "I'm really troubled about the deaths of children in Gaza. What do you think? What do you think about the current Israeli government?" And talked about it. But to make a comment about your family and to just wish them the worst thing in the world, that prevents any kinds of meaningful conversation from taking place. And that's what's so disturbing. Zach, please, your friends or other non-Jewish students on campus, what has been your observation?
Sure. So directly after October 7th, myself and a few other students started an initiative on campus to start tabling. For those of you who are not familiar, tabling is essentially going out in a central part of campus that gets a lot of foot traffic, and going out and speaking to people about something that's important to you or trying to garner support for something. So we went out trying to get donations from Magen David Adom in order to support the emergency services in Israel. And I was really amazed at the diversity of people who are willing to come up and help. And there's two specific communities that just were very overrepresented in coming to support. First was our Christian allies on campus, did a tremendous job of coming out to support us, not just coming out to our vigil, but also coming to support Israel's emergency services, which is something that isn't part of a group, right? Like you don't have to go there to be a representative of a Christian group that you're part of on campus. That's just you walking past on your way to class and seeing, wow, they're doing something really nice, let me go contribute. And the Indian and Hindu community as well. Absolutely phenomenal support. I'd like to share a quick story about this one student. I had never met him before. His name is Niels. He comes up to our table in the center of campus on his way from class to class and asks us, "What's this going on? Why are you guys out here with the table? What's this banner say? What does this flag say?" And I explained to him, I said, "We're out here and we're tabling, we're trying to get donations from Magen David Adom, which are the emergency services in Israel, in order to best help all of those who were affected by and continue to be affected by the events of October 7th. And we then got into this 20-minute discussion about everything that has been happening there. And he expressed how terrible he felt for all of us and how no one should have to go through that. And at the end of our conversation, he takes out his wallet and takes all of the money that he had in his wallet and puts it in our tzedakah jar, all $160.
Oh my God.
By far the largest donation by any singular person.
Wow.
And I think that really speaks to the fact that there are people out there who just have a good heart, and as long as you connect with them and show them what we're about and also make them understand what we've gone through and what we are going through, that are incredibly willing to help.
That's terrific.
Yeah, now to just shift focus for a quick second. That being said, there is also much more diversity at these pro-Palestinian protests than there are at the Jewish ones. And at first, I was very distressed when I saw this. I like to go to the pro-Palestinian protests, obviously not to take part, but just to see what kind of people were there, what do they say, what pamphlets are they passing out. And I went and I saw a lot of diversity. You have obviously Muslim and Arab students, but also white students and black students and Asian students and Hispanic students. And I thought to myself, now that's really disappointing. The Jewish community have always been one to support other communities in their times of need. The Jewish community was the largest group to march alongside Dr. King in the 1960s during the Civil Rights Movement. Why are they not supporting us now? And upon reflection, I realized there are some people in this movement, this pro-Palestinian movement, that since birth have been indoctrinated to think about Jews as something as less than human, as a different species. People growing up in very extreme Arab households who were brought up thinking this and might have no chance at ever having their mind changed. But the large majority of people are what I like to call the mushy middle. These are people that don't necessarily understand the conflict in its entirety. These are people that might have just started to learn about the conflict starting on October 7th. These are people that maybe have just learned about it in social circles, or maybe even on social media, which of course is not a reliable place of getting your news, who have just seen about it on Instagram or TikTok. And these are the people that respond to reason. And if you sit down with them, if you talk to them, if you inform them the truth of what's happening and present them with facts, present them with how we have seen everything, will genuinely respond to that situation and be like, wow, I didn't realize that that's how it was. Now, for that reason, I say it must be the Jewish prerogative to go out and to inform these people of what's truly happening, because there's so many people that might go to these pro-Palestinian protests, and if you don't say anything to them, you might just see that and think, oh man, just another person that hates Jews. No, there are so many people that just need to learn the facts. And I know I'm taking up a lot of time. I just want to share one really quick anecdote that I think is really a testament to this. On October 7th this year, there was a large pro-Palestinian demonstration in the center of our campus. And naturally, I wanted to attend to go see who was there and go see if I could talk to some people. Now, I get there, and there's hundreds of people. I'm not going to go up to someone whose face is wrapped in a keffiyeh, holding up a banner that says, like, resistance is justified, right? That's not my target audience. Those are not the people whose hearts and minds I can change. No. I go to the outskirts of this protest, and I see a girl sitting there with a homemade from the river to the sea shirt on a tank top with it cut off on the bottom with her whole stomach showing. I won't go into more detail about that. But I think to myself, does this girl know what would happen to her if she went to a place like Gaza wearing this shirt? So I go up to her, I sit next to her, and the first thing I say is, hi, my name is Zach. It's very nice to meet you. I'd love to talk to you about what you're here doing today and what you're here to support. And we ended up having a 20-minute conversation where I realized she knew absolutely nothing. She knew nothing about the cause she was supporting. She didn't know which river and which sea. She did not know what she was supporting. So I took the time to explain to her, from my perspective, everything that's happened to the Jewish community, both before October 7th, on October 7th, and post-October 7th, and how the protest that she is attending is cultivating this culture of treating Jews as a problem, as seeing Jews as the reason for justified violence, simply because they exist as Jews. And by the end of the conversation, she looked me in the eye and she said, wow, thank you. I really didn't know all of this. And she got up and she left the protest. Right. Now, that I think is... Thank you. That is what every Jewish student should strive for, not to go to these protests and say, oh, these people all hate me. These people all hate Jews. These people want to kill me. No. There are so many people who are there simply because they're misinformed and because it's a social trend, it's a fad. They want to be a part of something. They want to emotionally connect themselves to a cause and say, I should be here. This seems like a fun little community to be a part of. We're advocating for human rights. We're the good guys. They simply just don't know. And as Jewish people, we have to stand up for ourselves and use our voices to inform them of the reality of this situation.
Great, okay. So Zach, thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for what you described. I love, by the way, I'm going to use that, the mushy middle. Not referring to the young woman that you had the conversation with necessarily, but you know, you have to be ambassadors to the mushy middle. I mean, that's really what is, for all of you and for all of us, the kind of secret to any possibility of getting past this mess and not assuming, you know, the phrase pro-Palestinian pro-Palestinian, it's been hijacked by these extremists. There should be a way to advocate for innocent Palestinian people without telling Jewish families to go to hell, without doing things that are violent, without undermining the rights of Jewish people to exist. And unfortunately, I mean, that's one of the many casualties of this, that is not what's happening on your campuses. So I want to just ask one further thing, because the sun is getting ready to set, and we're going to start mincha soon. So you've each been doing advocacy, and you could talk more about that, afterwards. People are certainly welcome to come up and to talk to any or all of these extraordinary young people. But I want you to just imagine that you are addressing high school juniors and seniors, and they're concerned. They've heard about what's going on. They might be apprehensive about going to certain places, or might be apprehensive about their upcoming college experience at all. And what would you like to tell them as they are thinking about the whole application process, where and what? Based on what you've experienced, what would you like to tell them to inform their preparation?
I would say two things. One is to get involved, and two is to get educated. On the note of involvement, the Jewish community on whatever campus you end up attending, no matter how large or small it is, will be there for you and will be there to welcome you with open arms. Perhaps even the more intense the situation is on your campus, the more tight-knit that Jewish community is. But in terms of getting educated, as Jewish people, we of course feel an affinity to Israel that exists naturally in us, but that's not something that non-Jews feel. And having an education on what's going on in Israel and the morality of the Israeli army and the Israeli government is really important. For me, I took a course with Moji Pomerati and Ron Wasserman that was like 6 or 8 hours at the end of my senior year of high school that just went through all of the different sort of facets of common Israel criticisms and their rebuttals. There is one page in particular that I refer to all the time that had sort of a table with Israel and then South Africa and all of these things that happened in South Africa and don't happen in Israel, as an example of, Israel's not really an apartheid state. That's sort of a lofty claim. And I would say getting educated and taking the time, both, before you come to college and as you continue to go throughout your college experience is really important. It's the only way that you can sort of appeal to reason and have an effective conversation that doesn't end in, agreeing to disagree.
Fantastic, thank you. That was not a paid advertisement, but we do meet with high school, there she is, Moji Pomerati in the crowd. We do meet with high school students here. We do try to have what one Israeli educator called high resolution, which isn't simplistic explanations, but just a deep understanding of what's happening so that when our students do get to college, they don't feel like they are adrift. So Zach, why don't you go, and then Emma, you'll speak after Zach.
Sure. So I think the most important thing, the one sentence that I feel like can perfectly encapsulate what I want to speak on is for all students that are going into college to aspire to Jewish excellency. Now, what I mean by that is there are too many times where I'm in Jewish circles and I'll see kids and I'll be like, oh, why'd you not come to the pro-Israel rally that we had? Why'd you not come to the event? And they'd be like, oh man, I really care about it. I really wanted to be there. I just don't know that much. Like, I don't want to get into an argument with someone. Like, what happens if I get into an argument with someone? We are now in a day and age where, as Jewish people, as Jewish students, it's no longer acceptable to not be in the know about what is happening. There is an abundance of resources out there to educate yourself. Going into school, I had 4 years of attending seminars, of doing personal research, of taking classes, of speaking to people, so that I went into school educated and understanding the conflict and having the ability to not only talk to people, but to persuade people as to why, as Jews, as people who support Israel, we stand on the right side of history. There are Fuel for Truth seminars. You could go on the ADL website and look at their audit for anti-Semitic incidents. There is an abundance of resources out there so that when you come to school, you're not one of these people who cares about Israel but does not feel empowered to go speak about it because you don't know enough.
Great.
Now, if I could just add a little bit more.
But of course.
It's important to also understand for all these students that are going into college that this does not have to completely consume your life. I am fully immersed in the Jewish and the pro-Israel world at my school. I run a pro-Israel club. I founded and run a pro-Israel club at my campus. But I am also in a fraternity. I also play intramural sports. I'm also part of a government fellowship program. I also have a pretty busy school schedule. We can't shy away from these problems by saying, oh, I don't have time. I have a busy schedule. I have a hard major. We are able to do both. And that is why I say we must all aspire to Jewish excellency. Aspire to excellency in your schoolwork, aspire to excellency in your character, in who you are as a person, and aspire to excellence in who you are as a Jew, to standing up for your community. Because as my wonderful and beautiful grandparents who are here today would always tell me as I was growing up, umstiegen ist nicht zu helfen, which is a German phrase which means closed mouths don't help anyone. As Jews, we are in an era of history where we must stand up for ourselves. If we do not open our mouths for our people, for our community, who will? It is on us, it is our Jewish prerogative to aspire to Jewish excellency.
Beautiful. Emma, please.
Can I just say what Zach said? Like, end it right there. Okay, I could make like a
Okay, I just
priority
have a
list.
feeling, Emma, I've known you for a long time, and I have a feeling that you also have something very important to say. So please.
Thanks. I don't know, I think when it comes to college, I was like put together like a list of priorities that I wanted to find in my school, and it included the Jewish life, it included like the sports and all the different ways to get involved into your campus life. I want to be in the city, like all of that. You can find that. I think when it comes to Jewish life, I was looking for a place where I would feel supported, where I can feel like I can celebrate my identity and I would have advocates for me. I wasn't looking for like an uphill battle of trying to celebrate my Judaism. So yeah, that's.
Okay, so I thank you, Emma. So as I started by saying, Yom Kippur, it has an intense vibe. It has a vibe of kind of worrying about what's going on and worrying about the future, but there's also an incredibly optimistic vibe that starts in the afternoon, because we know that if we can actually look within and summon our strength and summon our will, that we can face any challenges that come forward. I hope that this panel was part of that feeling of optimism for each of you here. And I just want to say to you guys, first of all, thank you. Thank you for just like with no ambivalence, just saying yes when I asked you to do this. Thank you for being an incredible source of pride to your parents and grandparents, some of whom are here, and for your people, and for humanity. You guys are doing all of that. So have a wonderful year. Thank you. And if you want to come up and wish them Mazel Tov and ask questions, please do. And we're going to have mincha in a few minutes. So one more round of applause. Guys, I want to take this on the road. I'm actually ready. Phenomenal.
I just want like a gross percent
We'll do it right. You can, and I'm sorry, I didn't even have like a cup of coffee for you guys. I got to see it.
you can't do it on the road. Excellent.
Well done.
Thank you.
Well done.
Sorry. You guys feel on the campuses, when there's any of the encampments and the tents and everything, you feel that that's coming from other
Guys,
sources?
I'm going to suggest if you guys come down, because they're going to have to switch things up.
Instead of taking questions and comments. You guys are great, but your schools are abandoning you. Hate speech is not free speech. SJP should be kicked off the campus. Everyone involved should be deported. My friend is Bruce Weber. You're not still there. You graduated? My friend is the new. Did they get rid of that dean? My friend is the dean of the business school at Baruch, starting last month. He's new. His name, I don't know. Was that the business school dean?
The dean that I was speaking to was like the president of the school, of the whole group.
But you mentioned the dean.
So the dean was of Macaulay, and that's of like the honors
Oh, it's different. Okay. He's the dean of the business school, which is 75% of the students are in business. His name is Bruce Weber. He's a brilliant, a great, very approachable. But if are you still involved with it? His wife is one of my best friends. I know him forever. He's brilliant. He went to Harvard. He's a good person. But yeah, you guys are doing a lot, but it's not enough. The school presidents don't have to let them speak. Free speech, I wanted to say it. This is the first time they didn't take questions or comments from the audience. He was very weak. The rabbi is I've tried to explain to him that hate speech is not free speech. Hate speech is three basic things. Let me just tell you. It's threatening, isn't it? It's threatening, inciting violence, and defamatory. And you know the detail. But they don't have to allow it on any of these campuses. Did your school try to do what they did at, I also wanted to mention Dartmouth. Dartmouth had, last year, right after October 7th, Dartmouth got all the kids and educated them about Israel and Judaism, and they don't have protests at Dartmouth. Why are these other schools not doing what Dartmouth, Google Dartmouth, and what they did? They did sort of what South Africa did after the violence. They got everyone together and educated them. And they felt like a symposium. And it brought down, and there should be groups, clubs called anti-Hamas, not pro-Palestine. Anti-Hamas should be the name of your group. That's not his group. Because Palestinians are against Hamas also. I wish he would have let me talk. I have to write it down.
I didn't stop.